Hi, everyone. My name's Maddie, and I want to tell you the story of how I healed from psychosis using what I call the Mad Girl method. And I'm just going to give you a little background on what happened. So, we are about at the 4-year anniversary of my first psychotic mania symptoms. It's pretty exciting. So, and if you see me looking down, I do have some notes. So, this is my first time doing this. So, please be patient. What was I doing 4 years ago? So, 4 years ago, I was living in Chicago. I was working at an advertising agency. I had just got promoted. I was living with my boyfriend at the time. We were together 3.5 years. It all seemed pretty perfect on the outside. I mean, I was really killing it in my career. I had the boyfriend. I was living in Chicago. I had friends. We had just moved in together. It all seemed very perfect. But on the inside, I was dying. I was unwell. My job asked a lot from me. I used to work like 50, 60-hour weeks, and pretty much my only sense of identity was that job. I worked in the creative department. Um, and it just sucked everything out of me. And trust me, that was the best part of my life was my job. Like that, I loved my job, and there are a lot of, I don't regret anything, obviously, but there were still parts of that job that I would probably still do today because I loved it so much. But it did take a lot out of me. And then I was in a relationship that really never should have been together. Um, the man I was with was not physically abusive, but emotionally, verbally, and psychologically abusive. Um, it started right away in the beginning, and I just kind of ignored it. And then it went on, it stopped for a while, and that was like, I was like, well, he's changed. But when you live with someone who said awful things to you and called you names and made you just feel completely worthless, and you're supposed to sleep in bed next to that person, it takes a toll on you. And I didn't know how big of a toll it would take, but it definitely took a huge toll on me. And also, I had unresolved trauma from when I was 14. My dad unexpectedly passed away, and I was in the room where he passed away. He passed away from a pulmonary embolism. It's him right there, out of nowhere. So I had things were just bubbling up to the surface. I knew I wanted to break up with my boyfriend, but I wasn't sure if I was actually going to. I could never see a life without it, but I couldn't really see my life in general. Like, my life was so bleak. I'm a very visual person, and all I could visualize was just wading through trash, just walking with trash up to my knees. That's all I could see. I saw myself as like a puppet in the wind, and like, sounds kind of whimsical. And I also saw myself as constantly just sitting in the back seat of the car, which was my life. So I was not doing well. So what changed? So this is November of 2021. I'm working from home. Things are still a little pandemic-y, but my office decides to have an office party. And I was faithful to my boyfriend all the way to the end, but there was someone who at the office party made a move on me. And that move made me realize, oh, my boyfriend's never made me feel like this. Nothing happened, but I was like, I need to leave this relationship. But actually, what really made me knew I need to leave the relationship. So that was happening. The coworker made the move, but then I was watching Twilight with my ex, and I think I was like, I got off the couch and I was like stretching on the floor watching it or something. And I realized Edward would never be mean to Bella. It sounds so simple. It really does. And we really all think that we'd never be with a boyfriend who's mean to us. But, yeah. And when the coworker made the move on me, it made me realize, like, wow, someone can want me and not verbally assault me before they do, and not break me down. Because what my ex was really good at was, before we got together, we matched on Bumble, but we kind of knew who each other were before that. But our relationship started actually a little long distance, matching on Bumble, whatever. And we would do these phone calls and long texts and all these things. And he really, really love bombed me, and just like, and I was 22 at the time, and I had never really been in a serious relationship, and I wanted one so I wanted a relationship so bad. So I let myself just kind of fall into it. And there were some flags I just kind of zoomed past. And then once he showed the ultimate red flag, I was too suckered in. I was too into it. And I was like, I've already told my friends about this. I've already done this. I've already done this. I can't leave this relationship. It sounds so silly. Sorry if you hear my heater go on and off. But weirdly, after that relationship, I understand how people get sucked into a cult when you're vulnerable. Again, my dad passed when I was 14. I was 22. Um, the loss of your father at that age, you undoubtedly have a complicated relationship with men for the rest of your life. And losing men and being afraid to lose them, and what happens when you lose them, and what happens when you break up with them, and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, once that happened, once I broke up with my ex, we were living together, and then I had my first night alone in the apartment. It was like nothing I ever experienced. It was so sad, but it was also so magical. Like, it felt like myself had finally come home. I remember, I think I like took like an edible, and then I wrote music, and it was just like starting to like pour out of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is my calling. And just that rest of that week, when he had gone back home, and I was in our shared apartment alone, and things just felt so incredible. Like, everywhere I looked, it was like a pictured painting. The songs seemed to come on at certain times. Synchronicities seemed to form. I didn't really know what was happening, but it was the beginning of mania. But really, because you can label it as, and I'll use those terms because I think that helps the story, and I think it helps people track along with what I'm talking about. But really, what was going on is, my intuition had been so fractured by my ex, because I knew that he was bad for me. There was a voice in my head that said, do not go for this man, and I still did. So my intuition was broken. It was smashed. I had really just disregarded it. I disregarded a large part of myself. I am aware that I put myself into every situation in this story. Um, so when that coworker made that move on me, that coworker was someone who I had thought about before. And when I found out they had the same interest in me, it like blew my brain up, because it was it was like, oh my God, I still have intuition. That's still there. Like, that's still right. Like, and I was like, wait, the intuition was right about that. What else is the intuition right about? And like, that week, I was just like, bleh, like exploding with that. I was like, oh my gosh, wait, my intuition. And I was going all the way back. I'm like, wait, my intuition told me, like, when I was a little kid, to be a superstar and to be a singer and to be a pop star and all this stuff. And I was like, wait, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I'm like writing all this music, and it's just coming to me over and over and over again. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to actually do this, and I'm going to do it fast. So all this stuff is happening. Not all, I guess I haven't explained all of this stuff, but that is happening that week. And people are starting to get a little concerned about me, because I'm wanting to quit my job. Now, to preface, that job, again, was crazy. I had been thinking about quitting that job for a while, but everyone knew I loved my career, and my career had always been important to me because I did what everyone wanted me to do. I did what I wanted to at the time, what society wanted me to do, is I went to school, studied advertising, got the glamorous job out of college. I did it perfectly. I nailed it on the head, worked out one of at the time, one of the best, if not the best advertising agency in Chicago, was one of their best writers, doing all the big things. And so people were like, "Wait, you want to be a pop star? What the hell are you talking about?" I'm like, "You don't see, I've been writing all these songs, blah blah blah. I've always wanted to do this. My and I was like, my intuition is right. It's right. It's right." And it did splay out to my family too. I ended up uh I don't regret anything, but I it does hurt how much I knew I hurt my family. But I had issues with my family, and there had been a lot of unresolved issues, mostly stemming from when my dad passed when I was 14. And I just let it all out on all of them, all of the thoughts I'd ever had about my family, because I was like, my intuition is right. I have to do this. And it was just like an explosion. It was someone who had been stuffing themselves down in themselves for so long that it just came out like a volcano completely. I was doing everything. So, what I would say what mania is kind of like when you have an idea. It's so when you're manic or when you have mania or manic like symptoms, you're on the bipolar spectrum, you're on the schizoaffective spectrum. You're first of all, you're very intelligent. Don't let anyone ever tell you not. You're very very intelligent and you're very creative. Okay? That's just one of the things that's true about people who are bipolar. So, when you're bipolar, you have these visions that are so real. You can see it, and you can see it more than the average person. You're like, no, I can get here. And your first reaction during your first episode, the first time you have mania, you sprint towards those things. You completely sprint towards those ideas and you kind of abandon anything. Like you rip down stuff in your pathway. You don't care about who it hurts. You don't care about really hurting yourself because you're like bipolar people are often very traumatized and they often are holding stuff. When the mania comes out, it's things they've been holding for a really long time. So it just comes out in these explosive, detrimental ways because we don't really have the care or we don't have the room in society to understand what would happen. Like I've shown warning signs my whole life, truly. And there was never when you there was when there's neglect or when we don't really understand what's going on or we don't really understand our children or we don't understand how loss impacts a child and things like that. You tend to there could have been I could have been helped before this is what I'm saying. But I didn't know, the adults in my life didn't know. There's a lot there is a huge with a capital L lack of education on this topic. So that's what happened. So my conviction so the reason I sprinted towards this is because my world was so unbelievably dark. And as I said before, I was imagining the trash. I was imagining next to my head. I was extremely suicidal. I was, you know, unwell, just completely unwell. Um, and then things started to spin out of control. So I quit my job. I took another and it wasn't like so bad because I took another advertising job at like just a small agency. And but I did tell my past job that I quit to be a pop star. So, you know, that happened. But so it's my first time making a YouTube video. Um so after mania, so mania, things are out of control. I'm quitting my job taking this new job, things start to spin out of control, and I start becoming psychotically obsessed with someone, the coworker from before. Nothing nothing happened like physically. It was just a lot of like texting and stuff like that. I did think he was visiting me in my apartment every night, but that was just that was just me on me. I would sing to him from my bath all the time. Harmless stuff. Um, I would walk around on like scavenger hunts thinking he was sending me on them like telepathically. Um, I would go on walks at like 3 a.m. in Chicago. Not like the safest thing to do, but it was fine. I lived in a nice neighborhood. Some of the crazier things I did was at like midnight in the middle of winter in Wisconsin, took off my shoes in a parking lot. Feet got very cold, almost got frostbitten, was barefoot at one point. I did sit in a shopping cart, head back, fully thinking I could levitate. I tried to break into a shoe store with a chair, just slammed it. I also tried to break into a car with a fire extinguisher, set off a fire alarm in that parking garage with the car I tried to break into. Thought all those cars were for me, so I was like, it's my car, so why can't I break into it? um it was a I have yet to meet anyone who's done the amount of crazy shit that I did. It resulted in 3 involuntary stays right in a row, from the end of December to the end of January, that December 2021, January 2022. I would just get in and out, and like the thing is like I was so sweet and nice that like the doctors would think I was fine, and then I would get out and like immediately just like call that guy, or like immediately like do something completely unhinged, or think I'm talking like telepathy, stuff like that. Like um because my intuition was so broken, and I had so much conviction, I had to follow it. I had to follow it to the very end. And ultimately, like right now, Maddie is right now does not regret it. But let me tell you, Maddie in 2022, not okay. So now we get to the fallout. So basically, it was like a slow drip of like coming home from this. I finally went to my mom's house. Being around my family, calming down, the medication. I finally got put on enough medication to slow down. Like I was on antipsychotics the whole time, but I wasn't on a therapeutic dose. They were not putting me on enough to slow me down. I needed a little bit more medication. As I'll make more videos about this, but I am pro using medication as a tool. Um, I have a lot of opinions about the psych world and the DSM and like all this stuff, but I do think medication for our modern world to fit into it and to fit into the 3D, because we have to. Um, Medication is great. So the fallout, I was essentially told in less words that none of it was real. And like I had to wrestle with that, like this connection with this guy wasn't real, not in the way that I thought, that I had to wrestle with that the music I was making, that I wasn't going to be an instant pop star. I had developed a theory called the obvious theory, that the obvious theory was like kind of gibber. Actually, I got to look back at it. I'm not going to pass judgment. And it was like, wait, I was in the hospital? Like this world, I thought I had this magical, interesting world, really wasn't in reality. And that was devastating, completely devastating. I had to mourn that world, but also I had to come to terms with, oh, so I did that on the street and other people saw that. Okay. Other people saw me shouting and dancing on the street. Oh, so when I danced in the grocery store and the police took me out and I moonwalked away from them, Oh, those were just civilians seeing me. Those weren't planned actors and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, I had hurt my family. I was like, I had hurt these random people. I'd given someone a cell phone. Like, I had bought all this stuff. I had so much to wrestle with. So, what did I do to heal myself? This is what I'm going to call the mad girl method. Because when you're a crazy person, you got to heal in kind of a crazy way. Okay? So, the mad girl method is essentially what I did. It's a non-linear path, not following anyone's set of rules, not following any religion, not following anything directly. It's kind of madness, but you heal. And it works, and it has worked for me a couple of times. So, this is what I did. There was a lot of internal healing I had to do. So, I developed a really strong journal practice, which I can share if you guys are interested. I tried to do one thing every single day that was just more than laying in my bed. So sometimes it was brushing my teeth. I got really in, like, doing my skincare routine every single day, taking my medication every single day. Um, I did therapy. I did group therapy. I had a life coach, which actually helped a ton. It was like more grappling than there. It was like more real than therapy. I did EMDR. I also went into more unconventional things. I saw a psychic surgeon. I went to tarot card readers. I went to intuitive readers, palm readers, astrology readers, anyone who had something to say about me, or so I could learn about myself internally. I did it, and I just kind of yes-anded it. I took the improv philosophy of yes-anding and did that to my whole life. And that contributed to external work. So when I say external, I mean doing something outside of myself. So one of the first things I did once I was out of the psych ward was make TikToks about it. Because I had to I had so much on my plate, like, of forms of, like, guilt and misery and sadness and shame. And I was like, I have to get some of this off. I have to put some of it in the world, and I did. And I just posted random TikToks. They were kind of weird. I posted like weirdest things I did in Mania, the 12 strangest things I did in Psychosis or whatever, and they ended up going. One of them went viral, and it was like, oh my gosh, like there are other people like me, and I was slowly starting to find community. Something else I did right out of treatment was I joined an improv class. I literally missed like my last day of like group therapy after the psych ward so I could do improv class. It brought me outside of myself, and also it was something I always wanted to do. So with the Mad Girl method, it's about trying things you've always wanted to try, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Like, I had lost everything that made me me. I had to, so I was like, so because my job was gone, I wasn't living in Chicago. I have, obviously had broken up with my boyfriend. I didn't know what my identity was. So I had to just try stuff. And boy, oh boy, did I try stuff. So I said improv. I did the TikTok. I did the TikTok like I'm an old person. I did stand-up comedy. I made jokes about my episode. Getting a room full of people to laugh was invigorating and honestly more helpful than sometimes therapy was. I did a kickball league. I did a family feud league. I took a pottery class. I did a screenwriting class. I even quit my job at one point to become a tour guide to see what that was about. I did less conventional things. I went on a ton of dates. I let myself party again. I let myself get drunk. I learned from every single thing I did, but no matter what, I just said yes and to all of it. and I healed like a crazy person. Like, I did all different things at all different times, and I just kept doing it. I did have a bit of a for lack of better terms, like a relapse of depression. And but what I did to get back on the horse again, I ended up moving, did something radical, something crazy. I moved cities, I moved states, went to a city I had never been before, moved to a city I'd never been before, um, and just started saying yes and to everything. Like, took improv here, started doing choir, started volunteering with the Big Brother Little Sister program, or Big Brother Little Brother, Big Brother Little Sister, I don't know, whatever, Big Brother Little Brother. I started doing volleyball, I started doing yoga, I started doing anything that got me outside of myself. And before, I didn't mention before, but I did physical stuff like hot yoga and working out and walks and stuff like that. I started doing that here, and um, continued this method of healing. And something that really unites all of it is what was the hardest part for me to reconcile with after my episode was the radical acceptance of reality. It is what it is. So I had to accept things, that they're neither good nor bad, they just are what they are. So I remember my therapist at the time telling me to write down a list of what things are and how I could take advantage of them if I learned to accept them. So, like, at the time, I was living with my mom. I hadn't lived with my mom since I was 18. I was devastated. I'm living with my mom. Okay, I radically accept that I'm living with my mom. I don't live in Chicago anymore. What can I do with that? Okay, my mom has a gym membership where she says that she can get me into on her gym membership. Great, I can get really good shape. My mom has a or buys groceries. Great, I can have her make me or buy healthy groceries. Hang out with my mom. Great, I can work on my relationship with my mom. Um, I had the job that I took, I wasn't really loving, and I thought it was pretty boring, but it was great. I Once I accepted that, I was like, okay, I can use my extra energy and extra time to heal, to cry, to talk on the phone, to journal, to lament, to be slow. I was going through this traumatic time. And then lastly, the thing I had to accept that was the hardest was all of the stuff I did during my episode, all of the things I had told you guys about. And I wrote down, like, once I can accept that, what can't I accept? What can't I do? What can't I try? What can't I be? My mantra for all of that and for the Mad Girl method is, it is what it is. So that's the radical acceptance. It is what it is. You can't change it. It's neither good nor bad. It is what it is. But my addendum is, it is love. It is what it is, and it is love. Because yes, it's neither good nor bad, but you can still look at it with radical compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, understanding why you did it is what it is, why those things happened. Having radical acceptance and radical compassion for those things. What do I do now? So I actually work a 9 to 5 in Cincinnati. I have a nice relationship with my job. Don't want to do it forever, but pays the bills, and it's not my identity anymore. I just had a lovely night with a bunch of my friends last week for my birthday. I volunteer still. I do activities. I'm still working on what my new activity is going to be for the winter, but I'm still trying. I'm still saying yes to people. I'm making plans with friends. I did actually have a manic episode, or whatever you want to call it, this past summer. And that did unfortunately come with some heartbreak and some loss, but it really made me better. And it made me realize what I want to do, which is tell my story and talk about it more and tell people about it more and develop and name it, call it the Mad Girl method to healing, and teach people about it, and really be the representation that I wish I had when I got out of the psych ward the first time. Because 4 years ago, It was bleak. It was so bleak. Um, and I hope this video finds you in a good place, or if it doesn't, I hope it gives you some sense of relatability, some sense of inspiration, or something that, yes, it can be very, very dark, but it can also get a lot better. I don't really know how to end this, so I think I'm just going to end it there. Okay. Thank you.